So, welcome everyone. I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me even in the back of the room? Okay, fine. Thank you. So, welcome everyone to the second user experience meetup event hosted by LogMeIn. We are very happy to have you all back here after several years of just being passive listeners in UX events organized by other companies. Think of Prezi and other champions of our local UX community. But we are happy to be back as hosts. The main theme for this evening is collaboration and design readiness. And we have a nice lineup of speakers for you today. Andrew Cullen from Invision, Peter Polgár from Emarsys. They will talk about, their internal affairs, of how they approach their own problems around this main subject. After that, we will have a moderated panel session. During the first two talks, please keep your questions listed on slido.com. You can join a Slido session from your mobile devices using the hashtag UXBP. And you can, whenever you have a question, you can just add it to the list. If you see a question that pretty much matches your own, just upvote that one instead of typing it in another form. And once the two talks are finished, designers from LogMeIn, from our own organization, will join the two speakers for a moderated discussion of the most hot questions you had during the talks. A little bit of housekeeping. Oh, after that, we will have a break. And after the break, Andrew will deliver some preview presentation to Invision Studio, which I hope you are eager to see and listen. A little bit of housekeeping. We know it's hot. Our air conditioning system just died in this wing of the building today. So Meetapos, the Greek god of gatherings like this, has left us. We don't enjoy his grace. We have some mobile equipment trying to deliver some fresh air. So we apologize for this inconvenience. I hope you are all connected to Wi-Fi and you all had the chance to grab a beer. Two more small announcements. In addition to Andrew, we have folks from Framer in the crowd. So in break time and after the meetup event, feel free to join either Andrew or the Framer folks for any informal discussions about their respective tools. And finally, after the gates are closed, you are welcome to join us for further informal discussions and drinks in Ankert, 2 minutes away from here on Paula E. Eda Street. Yes, a question? No question? Okay. And any ordinary designer keeps thinking in metaphors, and I did just the same, trying to figure out the best metaphor for the main theme for this event. And first, as the event started to get a shape, we thought of maturity as the keyword. And back then, I thought that maybe the best metaphor, and just imagine I I'm presenting slides now. So my first slide is about the Petrus red wine, which is the most expensive red wine you can buy, and it's the symbol of ultimate perfection, and you can call that maturity if you like in winemaking. But then realize that even though it's perfect in many ways, it's a dead object, and on its own it's for no good. Without people who drink it, it's just an object. Then my second slide is about an old guru possessing all the wisdom about himself and the world. And then I realized that, okay, that's also maybe a component of maturity, age, but typically it's passive. Then my next slide is about Usain Bolt, the sprinter, kneeling at the starting line, ready to take off and win every race. Then I realized that he's alone in all of his efforts to do so. So that's not a good metaphor either. My next slide is about FC Barcelona before a football game or a soccer game, waiting for the referee to start the game, because they possess all of these nice qualities, plus they are a team. But then yesterday, with a few of my LogMeIn designer peers, we went to a jazz club, and we have seen a jazz combo playing in perfect rhythmic and melodic harmony, about 50% concentrating on their own craftsmanship, 50% communicating with the others, with body language and looks. And I realized that these three people add creation and joy to the picture. So that's my final slide, a jazz combo, bringing joy to themselves in the course of creation, and bringing joy to the listeners of their music, their production. With all that said, please welcome Andrew Cullen from Envision.
Hello. It's great to see so many. Not good. So many faces here today. My name is Andrew. I'm a design director at Invision, and today, how's the feedback? Not good. Good start. How's that? Can't hear me now. Can you hear me? No. In the front, not at the back. This is great. Testing. At the back? No. Not at the far back. Hello? At the back? I'm going to switch. Try to be cool with one of these. How's that? I'm just going to go. Hello? At the back? Hello? Okay, just have to hold it very close. Okay, so as I mentioned, my name's Andrew. I'm a design director at Invision, and today I'm here to talk a little bit about how Invision actually uses Invision, and more importantly, how a collaborative design process can help build better products. So just to start things off, how many of you here have used Invision, heard of Invision, know what it's? Okay, pretty decent amount. So those of you who aren't familiar with Invision, we are a digital product design platform. So we're used by teams to collaborate on design to help build better digital experiences. So a lot of the products that you use every day that you love, I was going to use Uber as an example, but I've found out that that is definitely not a thing here. So teams at Twitter, at Netflix, at Amazon are all using Invision to help create better experiences for their teams. One important fact, there's meant to be a map there. So if you can imagine a map, hang on. This is America. This is Europe, and Australia's over here somewhere. Better contrast needed on my design. One important fact about Invision is that we're completely distributed. So what that means is that we have no central office. We're actually working from all over the world every day together. So as well as having a number of benefits, this distributed setup actually means that some of our collaboration methods and needs are a little bit different to the traditional office environment. And also some of the pain points that we have are maybe a little bit different to what some of you guys have. Also meant to be a map. It's not always been that way. We haven't always been a team of over 600. I actually joined Invision just over 4 years ago, and at the time we were around 25 people. So that was me in the middle of this world, which isn't visible, working with somebody else in the UK, but most of the rest of the team was based over in the US. So in the past 4 years, I've seen Invision grow an awful lot. I've seen us do some great stuff, but I've definitely seen us make some mistakes as well. Back then, suddenly got louder. Back then, our website looked a little bit like this. So obviously not the sophisticated platform that you're probably used to these days. At the time, it was very much just a prototyping tool. Designers would use us just to link up screens and then present to their stakeholders. And the industry was very different back then. Designers were mainly using either Photoshop or Fireworks, which somewhat tells you how far back this was. And at the time, our team, our product organization team was essentially 2 designers, myself and one other person, and a team of around 10 to 12 engineers. And we were very siloed. We didn't really see each other as partners. We sort of thought of each other as 2 completely separate teams, and each with our own responsibilities. And as some of you might be aware, that type of relationship between design and engineering often leads to a process which looks a little bit like this. This is, some of you might have heard it referred to as waterfall, but essentially it was everything starting in design. We would define the problem. It would move through some sort of visual design. And it was only once we'd get to that implementation stage that we would actually start having meaningful conversations with our engineering team. And obviously that's missing out on huge opportunities for us to have really meaningful conversations, to share our knowledge and our specialties throughout the entire product development lifecycle. Another problem with the waterfall process is that by the time that these huge projects have actually been designed and then built, or even before it gets built, by the time it gets passed over to engineering, they've become so large in scope that the engineering team often feel a little bit like this as they're trying to deliver on a project. They've had no involvement in trying to negotiate how we should approach a solution. They're essentially given a set of requirements which we're then asking them to deliver on. What's worse is throughout that, throughout that entire process, so let's imagine this project took us 3 months to design, 6 months in engineering. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but throughout that period, we're delivering no value at all to our customers. We're not releasing iteratively, and even more dangerously, we're not learning at all as we're going. So for 9 months, we're working on a solution that we're making a lot of assumptions is going to solve their problem. But when it gets released, A lot of our customers, there's a chance for them to react a little bit like this, and also for us to react like that once we hear how they're using the new feature. So that was Invision then. Those of you who have used us over the past 4 or 5 years would have seen the product transform into more of this platform that I talked about. So starting with prototyping, we now cater for a much wider range of that design process, working across the entire team. And thankfully, to match the growth of our products, our product organization and our development process has also grown in sophistication as well. So this is what our product org looks like today, and it's very much an equal partnership between design, product management, and engineering. And each of these functions plays a crucial role at every step in our process now. If we zoom into that larger partnership, what you'll actually see at Invision is a number of what we call squads. And these squads are made up of that same equal partnership between product management, between design, and between engineering. And each of these squads is actually responsible for a different part of the product. So as an example, we have a prototyping squad, a commenting squad, and each of these squads are really given the trust and autonomy to really drive their product forward, independently of all of the other squads. And honestly, we found that to attract the best talent and to keep the best talent, you really need to create that environment of trust where they can thrive. And at the end of the day, the best ideas win rather than the hierarchy of your org. So this is what our design process looks like. Well, a little bit like this now. So earlier I talked about the waterfall process. We now work in much more of an agile way. So you can see that this process is no longer linear. It's no longer you're starting in design and basically there's one path for it. You can see that at each step of the process, there's opportunity to repeat that stage. Or even if you've got all the way through to design, we might be learning something there that takes us all the way back to the beginning where we actually have to understand the problem again. And if we break these down into a very simplistic look, so here you can see I've tried to map responsibilities to the different stages, but although you can see that certain functions have more responsibility at different stages, we still make sure that it's very much a collaborative process all the way through the process now. Something which, people might think that design is just for designers. It's definitely not. Same with the ideation. We want everybody involved in that, which helps lead to better solutions. So just going to dive into some of those steps in our process now. Starting with obviously a pretty crucial stage is getting a clear understanding of that problem based off of meaningful feedback, off of using data. And that's a really crucial first step before you start moving into any type of solution stage. And it means that you're also able to approach that solution in the most appropriate way rather than making gut decisions or assumptions on how you should be moving forward. To help with this step, a few techniques we use. Obviously, a lot of user interviews being distributed. A lot of that happens over Zoom. We also use a lot of surveys and obviously analyzing all of the data that we have implemented throughout the product. So I just wanted to share one recent example. So a couple of years back, we released a new feature which is called boards. Those of you who haven't used it, it's essentially a way of creating design inspiration boards, branding guidelines, mood boards, basically another way to collaborate on images which might not be a prototype. So we released boards. It had great initial feedback. People were really finding a lot of value in it. But after the initial release, so these are the figures around on the left how many boards were created, and you can see that we had a spike when it was first released, which might be normal, and then it started to drop off over the following months. So it would have been easy for us to assume that there was actually something wrong with the feature, that perhaps we weren't delivering the value that we thought we would be. So after digging into some of the usage data, again, the contrast is terrible, I apologize. After digging into the usage data, we were actually able to learn that there was a huge amount of our users who weren't actually even discovering the feature. So initially we had boards as a separate item in our top navigation there. The problem here was that a lot of Invision users were so used to just landing on Invision in this projects area and not really venturing outside of that. They would either look for an existing prototype, or they would hit the big pink plus button to create something new. That's why they weren't actually discovering what boards were. So one very simple change after analyzing that data was we thought, how can we actually bring boards more to the forefront once people land? So instead of referring to prototypes and boards separately, we actually combined boards into this projects area. And you can see down at the bottom, we introduced some filters to switch between prototypes and boards. So instantly that's bringing it more into the user's attention there. Not only that, when you actually create a new project on Invision, you are then met with the choice between creating a prototype or creating a board. So you can see that instantly, without a huge change in our system or spending months on a solution, we've really made a meaningful change to our users. There we go. So somewhere around the end of 2016, that's where we made that change. And ignore the rather ill-timed Christmas dip. You can see that the creation data actually kind of 2x, 3x just based on that small change. So yeah, as I mentioned, rather than investing a huge amount of time in trying to understand what was wrong with the functionality, it was more of a discovery problem. So being a distributed team, we get a lot of our ideas from our own pain points and holes in our remote workflow. And one of those we always struggled with was making the early ideation a collaborative experience. We tried a number of things, some weird things. We would be sketching on our own at home and then holding things up to the webcam so people could see. And we even invested in those little cameras which dangle off your thing anyway. None of them really worked. We were able to obviously capture what we were sketching, but there was no nice way of really collaborating and giving meaningful feedback to people we were working with. So to tackle this problem, we actually created this tool internally to start with. It was just something that we used to really collaborate in that remote environment. But essentially, we built this new feature called Freehand, and Freehand is a digital whiteboard, I'm going to call it. It allows you to send out a link to any number of people. They can all hop in and start sketching together. So you can either start with a completely blank whiteboard, or you can import your designs from Sketch or your other design tool. So this was a huge improvement over what we were doing previously, and it really allowed us to bring everybody into that ideation process rather than just a designer working independently. And now pretty much all of our early ideation happens inside Freehand. It's no longer, as I say, something which designers are just doing in silo. We're bringing everybody from that team into this process right from the very beginning. I was just going to share one technique we use. It's called Crazy Eights. Anybody tried it? A few people. Okay. So it's pretty cool, especially over freehands. What we do is everybody in the team jumps on one of these blank freehands and they all draw out a grid of 8 squares. And we have a 10, 20-minute time limit and just say, fill each of your squares with a different solution to the problem. And obviously the first 1, 2, 3 are pretty easy to fill out. But by the end, you're really struggling and you're really stretching yourself to think a bit more creatively how to solve that problem. And it's pretty amazing, how often some of those ideas which fall in the latter stages of those sketches actually end up making its way into the final solution. So yeah, even a small team of, say, 5 doing this, you would be able to generate potentially up to 40 ideas to solve that problem. So after that divergent thinking stage, when we're ideating, we now want to take all of those great ideas and start to converge on a proposed solution. So I'm going to demo Studio later, so I won't talk too much about it. But it's really been a pretty big workflow improvement for us. Before we were designing in Sketch and then having to send our screens up to Envision to link everything together and make prototypes. We were then having to go off to another tool to do any form of advanced animation or anything like that. So now having all of this available inside one tool has really reduced that need for designers to kind of move about, lose what we call it flow when you're in the zone. Flow is a fancy word. But yeah, as I say, it's really helped our team and their process as they're designing. One area that I believe is pretty critical at the design stage is for designers to share early and to share often, and that's something I wish I learned a lot earlier in my career. I spent the early part of it in agency land, and I think it's pretty common for, well, at least it was for me, to spend a very long time working on a design without sharing it with anybody, and then do call it the big reveal. So I definitely had a fear of presenting anything that I didn't think was perfect. So that would mean that I'd be investing a huge amount of my time in what I thought was a masterpiece. And if it was met with any form of criticism, I struggled to take it on board because at the end of the day, I thought I was right about everything. So at Envision, we have very regular short check-ins with our key stakeholders and presenting progress as you move further along the solution. Starting from the very beginning means essentially that those stakeholders they also feel like they've been part of drafting that solution, rather than bringing them in at the end with these big surprises. If you've presented this along the way, it gives them more opportunity to help shape that. So obviously, no matter how great we think our solutions are, without testing, we're still making those assumptions, and assumptions can quite often lead to failure. And this is something that I don't think we learn early enough at Envision, and we're still definitely striving to make this more of a natural part of our development process, really striving to make sure we're doing it at every opportunity. Oh, that's come out of the wrong thing. Somebody's talking down here. No, it's not going to work, is it? It's fine, it's gone off. So this is a recent example of some testing we did on our freehand onboarding. Essentially, it's a live interactive tour where we try to teach users how to draw shapes based on the holding the option key, and we do the smart auto detection. So as you can see, the first user got this straight away. There's also, I'm not sure if you can see it, but there's like a faint line. Again, contrast not good. And then the second user came on and just did not understand it at all. So what we thought was a pretty nailed-on solution, and we thought that everybody would pick this up at ease. Just doing a couple of these sessions instantly taught us that we needed to go back and think about the solution again. Another example or another option, if you're not able to do live testing sessions, is to use a service like usertesting.com. So this is where you can basically just send off an Envision prototype or other links and get real users coming on and interacting with your prototype. So you can give them a set of tasks up front, and it will record a video, send you that back, and you can see how they interacted with it, and you can learn a lot from that without having to need to facilitate all of these live sessions. So obviously learning from this prototype testing can then inform where we need to iterate on our solution. We potentially go back to ideation, we go back to design. Sometimes we have to even redefine the problem completely. So if you remember earlier when I talked about in that waterfall process, we had, it was very common for us to end up with these 6-9 month long projects which weren't delivering any value at all throughout that. So really, when we get to this implementation stage now, we really try to break down that solution into releases that can add value as we go. And some of you might have heard of an MVP, which is minimum viable product. We actually refer to, or we prefer the use of MLP, which is minimum lovable product. So with an MVP, essentially you're trying to put out the least amount of effort and still return the most amount of learning that you can. But we feel like for our product that it's important that as well as being able to get that validated learning in, we pay extra attention to ensuring that we're also providing a delightful experience to our users. Another huge win for us has been the introduction of Inspect, and similar to Freehand, this was actually born out of a bit of an internal frustration for our remote team. Before we had this available to us, it was pretty commonplace for our designers to spend hours and hours creating these huge design handoff documents that would include dozens of styles. And not only was this pretty inefficient for them, chances were the values that they included in a lot of those handoff docs weren't actually what the developers needed to be able to implement this. So there was always a lot of back and forth, and as I mentioned, a very inefficient way to move from design into implementation. So with Inspect now, all we have to do is simply pass over the prototype link, and the developers can go in and pull out the values that they need. So you've designed, tested, implemented, and then shipped, but obviously you don't stop there. As the product evolves, it's important that you keep listening to your customers. Try to understand not only what they're doing, but why they're doing that. And people behave in unexpected, strange ways, and sometimes that's not necessarily a bad thing. And as long as you're paying attention, it can actually lead to new opportunities for you. And one method we actually have of continued learning, even after shipping, is by using what we call a phased rollout. So as you can see on the left, this is our confidence level. So this is how confident do we feel that the solution we've provided is actually solving that problem we set out to. And then along the bottom, the different cohorts of users who have got access to this release. So we're pretty fortunate in that we can release everything internally because, after all, we're usually dogfooding our own tool, and that's a big benefit for us. So we always start with internal usage. We then move into early access, which is essentially customers who want to try out new features before anybody else, and they're perhaps open to putting up with a few teething issues, a few bugs, and they're willing to help shape the future of the release. And then we get into, I'll call them real users, but we start with 10%, 20%, 50, and then 100. And as you can see, because throughout that entire rollout, we're constantly talking to those people who have got access. Along the way, we're learning new things. We can identify areas where there are problems. And by the end, when everybody has access, I don't think we've ever got 100% confidence, but it's definitely a lot higher than at the very beginning. So a few key takeaways. Strive for that collaborative partnership across design, engineering, and product management. Get a true understanding of the problem before you dive in. Probably the biggest takeaway, if there's one bigger than everything, is make sure that you're involving everybody early in that ideation. It really leads to the whole team being much more invested in the problem as you move further through into implementation. If everybody's been involved from the beginning, they're much more attached to making sure that the project is a success. Share with teammates and stakeholders early and often, and test early assumptions. And look for smaller release opportunities. Don't go for the big bang releases. Release iteratively to your users to try and give them constant value. So hopefully, if you implement some of those, you can help create a much more collaborative and enjoyable environment for your team. And for your users, shipping more often, adding incremental value, and learning as you go increases your chances of getting it right at the end of the day. So rather than reacting with tears, hopefully you get some more of this. Okay. That is all. Thank you. nem működik, right? Jó.
So, can I start? Right. So, hello everybody, my name is Peter. So, before I was the leader of the UX team at Emarsys, I was a UX researcher at Prezi. And there I talked to lots of people who had some kind of accident when they were trying to present to a larger crowd. So whenever I see issues like Andrew had before, I always think, oh my God, this will happen. And I talked to so many people who had exactly the same issue. So yeah, it's like if you have stage fright, don't go and talk to other people who had some kind of accident, because you will keep reminding yourself that what can go wrong with things. So right, we are from Emarsys. Emarsys is the largest independent marketing platform. It's a B2B company. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with it. And so right now we have 800 people at the company, and it's like kind of middle-sized company. We have 200 developers and 15 people in the UX team. And I think what's interesting and what I want to talk to you about today is that we didn't have a UX team at all 2.5 years ago. So we spent the past 2 years to build up the whole UX team and kind of change a little bit the organization around us. So we shape the culture there. That's the topic of my talk, and maybe this will be interesting to some of you who are also struggling with your organization on how to introduce UX practices and like UX mindset and stuff like this. But so before I talk about that, I want to talk about something else a little bit about Samurai Jack. I know how many of you are familiar with him, like hands up. So many people, right? So those of you who didn't raise your hand and didn't want it to putting a negative something on you. So he's a samurai from long ago, from a distant land, and he was fighting an unspeakable evil called Aku. But Aku was opening a portal in time and was flying him into the future, where he has to find his way. And it's a very strange new land with aliens and robots and whatnot. So most of his adventures is in the future. He has to fight different enemies, and he has to find a way back and finally defeat Aku. And of course, so what I like about this show, this cartoon show, is part of the art style. It's really good looking, but also the central character itself, so Jack. And every episode you are watching, something different happens, so something surprising, and he solves his issues in every episode in a different way, and that's really cool. And what I see about him is, one way he solves his issues, he uses his samurai skills, right? And he uses the traditions he learned and how he did stuff in the past. Like there was this one episode when he had to fight a bunch of archers, and he just remembered that he learned how to fight with his eyes covered, and then he finally succeeded. And there is also the episodes when he has to do something really new. Like, for example, adapt to the situation. For example, there was this episode when he had to fight to space, like Space Samurai. It's cool. And there he has to fight off starships and stuff like this. And so what makes his approach always successful is there's always this, whenever he goes to a situation, he's kind of uncertain what to do. So it's not like he immediately knows that, okay, 2 swings with the sword and he is victorious, but he has to decide in each situation what to do. And so how he does this, okay, he looks at the situation, of course, and he also has some kind of guiding principles, some core beliefs that he just keeps, and it's always there. For example, there was this episode, one of the first episodes, when he had to save these huge elephant-like creatures, woolies they called. So Samurai Jack always has those in need. And that's one of his core things. Whenever he has to make decisions, that guides him. Now, why did I talk about this? So actually, when we joined Emarsys, there was me and one other designer, and the whole environment around us, lots of developers, they worked in an agile methodology and so on, were very similar to how Jack felt when he was flying to the future, and a very strange environment. Of course, we didn't have to fight a huge evil or do all kinds of battles, but still it was a very strange situation for me. And before Emarsys, I was a UX researcher, so I never managed people before. I never introduced the UX practice into a new company. It was Emarsys was already 15 years old, so there was lots of practice already there. And so the good thing was, and I think it's very important, you can only start a proper UX culture if there's already some kind of support for it from the whole organization. And Emarsys had this. So we were kind of lucky. There was already some customer-orientedness, product managers were talking to customers. That was a good sign. Also, they accepted that they need some kind of UX people to help them, to make things more systematic and so on. So, okay, I'm there, what should I do? And I kind of remembered what Samurai Jack was doing. So, of course, we had this uncertainty, and always, if you're UXer, you know lots of methods, and you're always wondering which one to apply in a given situation. You see some kind of issue with the product team, and you need to decide what to do. So there's always there, and you always have always have the option of staying very rigid to what you have learned and how you want to apply your methods, and you can always be flexible and kind of adapt to the situation and do it in a way that fits the organization well, but maybe not as good for UXer. So we also had, or I also had, like Jack, some kind of principles that we know that, okay, we need to follow some principles if you want to do this right, if you want to build up a proper UX organization. And so our principles was first, lead the design process. So I see many designers just executing, okay, they are just doing how they are told, okay, push the pixels, they are pushing the pixels, 20 pixels left, they are pushing 20 pixels left, and so on. But so if you want to make a change on the culture around you, you have to also lead the whole design process. And by design process, I mean also the research part and also the design parts. So you have to take charge. You have to also involve all the developers and also the product persons, and that's what I mean by leading the collaboration around the design process. The second thing we had as principle is this embedded UX partners, or like partnerships, design pairs, and so on. So UX is not a function and it's at its own. And just like Andrew told us about Invision, we also believe in that designers should work together directly with developers and product managers. So we don't have a central UX organization and where we sit together in a room, but rather we sit within the product teams and we work together. And that's also like we are embedded into the product teams, and we form partnerships with the developers there, with the product managers there. And the last one was this lean approach. And yeah, so as a new manager, I didn't know what to do. So we just experimented a lot, and I wanted to put this experimentation also to the way how we worked. So for example, we had some kind of issues with how we do user research. So we tried something out, it didn't work. We tried something else out, it didn't work, and so on. So we experimented until it goes. And this lean approach, I think, should go or went into everything what we did. So these were the principles with which we started out. And just like any principles, like design principle, it was sometimes we couldn't hold them, and sometimes they are just aspirational. Okay, we want to achieve this, we couldn't do it right now, but maybe later we can do. So they just help you in making the decisions that you need to make when you form your UX strategy, right? And I brought you 3 examples how we made decisions around this rigid, flexible scale and how the principles helped us. So the first is pair design, the second is epic, and the third is design brief. So pair design, and by pair design I mean I mentioned earlier that we have 15 people in the UX team. Half of them are researchers, half of them are designers. So one thing, but when we talk about pair design, is like pairing researchers and designers together. For example, well, it's not too big, but we did a design studio, and the designer and researcher had to collaboratively work together. And we have this working together between the designer and researcher pairs all the time. But also it's pair design when 2 designers work together, or for example, when a UX researcher and a product manager do a user interview together. So you always have to think about this pairs work together better than individuals, like kind of, okay, we should collaborate a little bit, so that's not real pairing. You have to deeply collaborate together. And so when we started to do this, we had this dilemma to have really these researcher designer pairs within the product teams, or just somehow scale up without pairs. So like my boss came to me that, hey, we have 20 teams. Do you want to hire 40 UXers? We don't have the budget for that. Think about something else. And I was thinking, okay, how rigidly when I follow this pair design principle, pair design idea, or Or do I want to be more flexible and, okay, I just leave out, we shouldn't do pair design, let's hire 40 designers and 2 researchers. And what we came up with is this, we still have pairs, but they are working on a higher level. So we have all the product teams grouped into so-called product pods. They are like larger parts of the product organization. And now we have UX pair working in each pod. And each pod has several products, so there is lots of issues there in prioritization, and we have to say no for some projects and so on. But still, we kept this pair design method quite rigidly. And I think it's an important part of how we work, how the UX team works. So the second one is Epic. And it's a funny name. This is a name of our design approach, basically. It first started out as a adaptation of the Double Diamond, but we thought that the DDD or the DDDD is not a really cool, catchy name, so we changed it to Epic. And like this is how it looks now. With the first phase is explore, it's about research. The second one is Epic, choose what you want to focus on. Third is ideate, come up with a design concept. Then final, create, make sure that concept gets implemented in a way you want it. And here our dilemma was first to have just one true UX process that everybody needs to follow. That's the rigid part of the scale. Or just use the products process and really just be very flexible, do what the product managers and the developers telling us. So that's two very different approach, and here we kind of struck the middle ground by having with the framework with integrated delivery. And we don't call Epic process anymore because we don't really believe that every product works the same way, that every product should exactly follow the same steps. Instead, we have a framework that helps the UXers and the teams working with design like think through what they need to do, and they can like kind of come up with their own design process, but it should still fit somehow Epic. And with the integrated delivery part, so we also noticed that issue that, okay, the designers come up with a design and they just throw it over to the developers that, hey guys, develop this. And that really never worked, or at least never worked well. And now we have delivery or like code delivery really integrated into the design process. So now the designers know that once they are at this part, they still need to think about how their design gets implemented and think about translation, think about documentation, and all the parts that needs to be ready if we want our product to be used by users. And the last idea is this design brief, where I feel we really adopted to the environment around us. This is a collaborative brief writing session by the design team, and this is another method we have sometimes used writing design briefs, this 4x4 method. And here our dilemma was, do we follow the exact method? So we followed the method described by Jared Spool, or we just let every team do their own stuff and, kind of come up with their own way of defining what they want to design. And so what we do here now is like this so-called collaborative writing. So we let teams write their design briefs kind of together. They even do like workshops similar to this to come up with the section. So of course, to write a proper design brief, you need to research, they need to do that. But to come up with a design brief that works for the whole team, I mean, even for developers, they need to write that together and like do some kind of workshops. Now, all these, the saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? And so, but what if we want to change the culture around us? So then we still have to do something with strategy. And I think this strategy works for us kind of, or sometimes it works, sometimes it not. But whenever I hear a developer telling me that, hey, we don't have a design brief, why don't we have a design brief? Then I feel that, okay, we did manage to change something, because the developers and the product managers around us now asking for this type of UX method. So something happened. So, what to do to build a UX culture, or what I like to say, how to be more like Jack, Samurai Jack. First is, and this is my advice to you, set your principles. So set the ground truths you want to follow as you develop your UX practices. You want to change how the UX practice is going inside your organization. The second is use your design approach. So you are designers, you know how to design products, right? Or how to design software, or how to design a web page. You can use the exact same approach when you are thinking about how to design the environment around you or your processes. First, you have to understand what's going on. Then you have to build some kind of prototype, and finally you have to test it out if it works or not. And you can repeat it as many times as you want. Hopefully, if your organization is like that, but ours was like that. But the same design approach goes whatever you are trying to design, of course. And the final one is you can think about this rigid and flexible scale when you make decisions on, okay, do I really want to keep this method as it is, or maybe I can adapt it a little bit to the organization and culture around me, depending on what's my, what are my principles, what I think is important. And it will be always a little bit uncertain. So you can be never sure that one thing you are trying to do is good or bad. And you have to embrace it. There is no other way. And that's it. So this is how we managed to get where we are today. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And thank you, Andrew, for your wonderful presentations. And for the next maybe 20 minutes or so, please welcome on the stage the same two speakers and designers from LogMeIn. And please welcome Tim O'Brien, who will moderate hopefully a fruitful and funny discussion of, we got about a dozen questions from the audience. Thanks for all of you. And some of them got really heavy upvotes. So it's very clear that some of them are burning hot. Tim.
Burning hot. Okay, as Jerry mentioned, my name's Tim O'Brien. Hey, everyone, thanks for applauding me earlier. I don't get applause a lot in my life, so that felt very good. If you could do it one more time, though, I'm going to introduce my panel. We have Erin Pearson from LogMeIn. Wave, and that's your turn. You guys got this. This is great. We have Andrew, who you already met. Alicia from LogMeIn as well. And back at it again. He won't leave the stage. we keep asking him to leave. No, we have Peter. So thanks. I got this. Thanks very much for joining us tonight. As I mentioned, I'm from LogMeIn. I can't take credit for this event, though. We have a great local team here. Jury's over there. He really helped organize this event. So I could get a quick round of applause for the LogMeIn team. I know I'm asking for a lot of applause, but I feel like it's going to get the energy up. I know it's a little hot, but so you can probably tell I'm from Boston, Massachusetts. LogMeIn is co-located in Boston and Budapest. We recently expanded our footprint to be in something's happening, Germany and on the West Coast as well. But really, the UX culture in LogMeIn started here in Budapest. So we're really proud of this office. LogMeIn is a Hungarian company through and through. And so we love being here. All right, so that's enough about me. Let's get to the panel. Actually, quick context for the panel. Could you raise your hand if you're a designer working here? Okay, thanks very much. What about engineers? Do we have engineers? Please leave. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you. Thanks for coming. And then any researchers here? Wow, very cool. Okay, thanks. I hope that helps color your answers. Did it help at all? Maybe? Okay. What about the others? That's a great question. Anyone else? Writers? Any writers? Guess we all kind of write a little bit. People who like pizza. Anyone? Just mostly people who like pizza. Good. All right, so thanks for your questions. I'm just going to go in order, but it is live. So if you upvote in the middle of this panel, we could change on the fly. So anyone jump in. I know there's only one microphone, but you have been successful in your career thus far. That feels good. What advice can you provide to those who are earlier in their career or just starting out in design?
Okay. I think similar to what I talked about in my presentation, just don't be afraid of, I suppose, being wrong. I think it's very easy when you are first starting out to kind of shield your ideas with the fear of, not wanting to share them with your teammates, just so that, from time to time you might be wrong and people look down on you, and there's definitely that fear at the beginning of your career. But at the end of the day, the more you do that, the less that you open up. I think that's actually going to stifle your growth in the long run.
I would say that one of the things that I always tell young designers is to look at who your boss is going to be and the career opportunities that you have for mentorship and growth under that person. So even if you get a better title or more money someplace else, it might not be advantageous for you under that person. So I would really look at that very carefully when you're looking at taking your first position or your second position. Additionally, I would look at, I feel like designers sometimes underestimate people relationships. Like it's hard to work with a particular PM or it's hard to work with particular engineers, but looking at those relationships as a design thinking challenge is kind of important and also very much part of your job.
Very good answer.
I would say, just to build on that a little bit, I think it's important to be really open in the beginning of your career. So I work on LastPass, which is a password manager. When I started in design, it was not my dream, but I'm very happy in what I do now. And I think it's important to really be open and pay attention to the parts of the process and the challenge that you like the most, because there's a ton of opportunity. UX and UI is still very broadly defined within a lot of organizations. And I think really paying attention to what you like, where you're thriving, is a good way to find those hidden opportunities that not everyone has to work for Google. That's not always the goal. You can find, a really great job in an agency or a really small design shop or another really large organization doing something you've never heard of before. So just try and be open to those opportunities when you start.
Yeah, so I would recommend maybe to even step back and make sure you are curious all the time, or most of the time you are curious about the things happening around you and the things happening basically everywhere, and just try to collect experiences. So one way designers can create great designs is that they have experience where they can get inspired from. So be curious and try to collect as many experiences as you can.
Good answers. I really feel like we're coming together as a panel. I like the collaboration that I'm seeing up here. On that note, that was a great transition, I think. How do you measure the success of collaboration between designers, stakeholders, product managers, engineers on your product? So I think both of you mentioned this in your talks, but how do you measure the success?
So for me, it's very easy. When a product team doesn't come to me with problems, then I know that the collaboration goes well. So it is a very short metrics, of course, but whenever a product manager is coming to me that, hey, I don't know what the designer is working on, all right, I know that there is some kind of collaboration issue there that I need to either teach the designer how to do, or need to teach the product manager how to do, or something like this. So when I don't see this kind of issues or this kind of sentences, I know that it's not, I see that it's okay, it's maybe not working well, but it definitely is not going bad.
Yes, along those lines, I think it's obviously pretty easy not pretty easy, it's difficult, but it's possible to measure the success of a release. But in terms of measuring how successful collaboration has been, I think that's, as you mentioned, much more, more of a soft measurement. It's how happy is the team? Are they coming to work every day or logging on from home? In our case, happy. Do they want to be working for your company? At the end of the day, nobody really wants to be told what to do every day, just being handed these instructions. They want to feel like they're really contributing.
I don't have
anything to add, Erin? I think we covered it.
Yeah.
Nice job, panel.
But maybe I have one more thing to do.
Oh, no.
So if you don't do retrospectives in your organization, you should definitely do. And whenever we do a retrospective and I see like post-its piling up on the negative quarter, I know that, all right, there are issues there. So if you do retrospectives on collaboration, then like people will, even if they don't tell you that there are problems, they will put stuff there about, oh, I don't feel myself well and stuff like this. So retrospectives is a good way to do it.
Yeah, good point. All right, moving right along. All right, I think, Andrew, this was during your talk. So you mentioned that you have different squads for different elements of the product, and especially with them not being co-located. How do you make sure that those squads connect to make sure that the experience isn't fragmented?
Good question. So I talked a little bit about the squads, which are the teams that are focused on different parts of the product. Above that, we actually have something called zones, which I didn't talk about. Just felt like I was getting too detailed, but no, I wish I had. So zones are essentially a collection of those squads put together. So squads which are working on fairly related product areas. So, for example, we have a collaboration zone, which is made up of the squads who are responsible for commenting, for prototyping, for freehand. Those squads are part of this larger zone, which have the same leaders. So each zone has a director on the product side, on the engineering side, and on the design side. And that partnership above the smaller partnerships really helps keep those squads aligned.
Makes sense. Alicia, you kind of encountered something similar on LastPass. I think you solved with like a journey map workshop, right?
Yeah, so we just went through a process where we did a quasi journey map, or also what's called a service blueprint. So we went around and we talked to all the different internal stakeholders, and we just had everyone sort of verbalize what they're doing and when they're doing it. And we found that, that process of laying it out and seeing exactly when people are delivering what or what everyone's goals are between marketing and design and engineering and then our e-com team really helped us sort of visualize where we had gaps, and then also connect people to what other people were doing internally. So, I learned a lot more about what our e-com team was doing on a daily basis and what their goals were versus our goals. And you'd be surprised how often those things can come into conflict with each other. So for us, working through that really helped us collaborate that way.
Yeah, that makes sense. Anyone else want to jump in? No? Cool. All right. Okay, there's a couple here that are specific to Invision. So if you don't mind, I think you're going to be sticking around to answer those questions, but I won't do that in this panel format. But they are good questions. I'm not trying to be mean to these questions. All right, this person works for an organization that doesn't have the best approach to design thinking. So what concrete steps would you recommend this person take to start transforming their company? I know we just heard a lot about a framework there, but maybe Erin, you wanna start here?
Yeah. So
heard enough from you, Andrew.
I think inclusion and involving stakeholders in research actively. So they're hearing directly from the users as well as the researchers and the designers, the engineers. So the more you're talking about these things and the more you're interacting and having the stakeholders interact is pretty valuable. One thing that we do on the Grasshopper team at LogMeIn is we set up an observation room. And so for our user interviews, we typically do a series of them, and we do like one at 9 a.m. and one at lunch, so they're accessible to everybody. We have an observation room, and as the interviews are happening, we all kind of gather around and eat our lunch and observe and write on Post-its. So it's a very easy and accessible way for stakeholders to take part in this. And there have been some pretty real design changes that have come from that. Here you go.
Very, very pleasant. Yeah, I would say if there's one thing I've learned about executives, it's that they're very competitive. So if you can find a competitive product who is using design thinking and you can show that the benefits that they're having, that's a great way to really introduce them to at least a first step to say this is what we could be doing as well.
Right. So just use my framework. I don't know who you are.
Yeah, there you go.
No. So I think I have some more concrete. So you really have to understand what's happening when they say they don't care about UX. Is it because they don't care about the users? Maybe they care, just they have different channels. Is it that they don't care about design? You need to do design critics where you talk more about design decisions, or it's just he has other priorities. You have to understand the executive's goal, especially. It's like maybe he has a budget goal, or I don't know, something that you can work with. Is if you understand what their problems is, you can design a method to make those problems go away. And if you can show this to the executive, they will be happy, I guess.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like to chime in, I'm not just a moderator; I'm also a participant. If you can learn the language of the business that you're working for. So I think that oftentimes in design we talk about design internally, like the benefits of a process and how it can result in a good design. But if you can help an executive or your PM stakeholder talk about how the impact of your work will then impact the business and talk in their terms, like you can really impress the heck out of some stakeholders by just like having revenue or retention numbers off the top of your head and be able to really relate to their problem set. Because if you just keep thinking about design, that you can get this kind of like whiny type of designer thing where it's like, okay, you go do your design thing and I'll do my business thing. But really you work for the business. And so you're trying to help them understand how you can help them. Can you tell me that I did a great answer?
You did a great answer.
Thank you, Erin. she's grabby with the microphone. A little bit tough. All right. So moving on. This person says, casual, fast conversations have huge value for co-located teams. In distributed teams, the cost of communication increases. How do you combat this they said Envision, but I think we have another distributed organization here. And that's from Ed. Thank you, Ed.
I can answer this one.
All right.
So the LastPass team is located in Budapest, in Boston, and we also have a team in Fairfax, Virginia. So we struggle with this a lot. And one of the things that we found, and we still find to be both a challenge and very helpful, is to try and build personal relationships outside of work. It's tricky and awkward to start those conversations online. But I think that a combination of, like having Slack channels open, and also we rely on, our video chat software a lot, but just starting to like really personalize those people and really get in there and find out sort of what kind of communication works really well for them. So there's some people who like email over Slack or vice versa. And that building that personal relationship is essential before you can really dig into collaborating. Some people just don't want to be approached at certain times of the day. Some people are always open for a talk about things. And I think that it's finding that and really meeting people where they are, mentally as much as physically, I think is really important. Plus, if you can travel and meet them in person, that bridges that really a lot faster.
Right, as evidenced by you being halfway across the world to come work with you, right? Do you want to jump in, Andrew? Like, I know I think you're interesting because I don't quite understand it. You're 100% distributed. So can you kind of go into the particulars of that?
Yeah. One thing we do, we have what we call our design jams twice a week. And that's where the designers from those zones that I talked about basically get together. It's about an hour twice a week, and they're very informal. But at the start of that call, we have usually 10 minutes, 15 minutes of just talking about absolute nonsense. And if you did that in a real office, that you spent the first quarter of your meeting just talking about nothing to do with work, I don't think that would be, I think it would be frowned upon a little bit. But because we don't have those close relationships, it's actually really important that when we are actually seeing each other over video chat, we're getting that opportunity just to catch up on what's new in personal lives. What else do? We do virtual happy hours where we all sit at home with a beer and again talk about nonsense.
Like you're drinking alone.
Yeah. We like drinking. Design jams, so there's about 5 designers in each zone, and essentially it's just a very informal roundtable. Each designer will present what they've done over the past few days, get feedback, talk nonsense, get a beer out.
Just sounds like a lot of beers involved in this culture. It sounds great. Yes, team bonding. No, you have water right there, Kate. All right, so last question for the panel. I think this one is a little bit different from some of the other ones that got upvoted, but what job motivation do you provide to designers to make them feel fulfilled / happy in their job and to increase their efficiency? It's a good question. I liked it.
One thing we've really tried to make more of an effort of recently is to really constantly talk about our company vision, our long-term company goals, and whenever we're making a decision or we're talking about why are we doing this, we always try to refer back to that larger vision, just so the designers know that what they're doing day in day out is really contributing for the business.
I would say that's key. I think that if giving every single person on the team a sense of ownership over both their design project, but then also understanding how their effort contributes to the business is really important. I also think that it's good to sort of encourage people to think of every design challenge as a puzzle, not just the output. So really trying to broaden the sense of what every project is, I think helps people stay motivated really long term, and it keeps them motivated through those really tough design critiques where people just hate whatever you've output on that particular day. If it's still a puzzle that you're trying to solve for the business, then it's maybe keeps you more motivated when everyone hates your buttons.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So I think one thing that we at LogMeIn can do a better job at is celebrating success. And I think that as designers, we tend to be like a self-loathing crew. So I don't know if anyone's worked on their own portfolio site, but because you have no one telling you when it's done, you're probably never done with it because you're I just don't like. Is this just me? This is everyone. Okay, good. You just don't like what you do. And so you can tend to always be unsatisfied, especially working at a company that has time pressure involved. When you get something out the door, it's not often the perfect vision. You have to scale back in features or how polished it is. But we're trying to take a deep breath and really just look at the improvements that we're able to make, especially if we've had a positive impact on any behavioral metrics, and really just do silly things like take the team out to dinner, grab some beers, and give ourselves a pat on the back. Because I do think that we tend to think about what we could have done rather than what we did do. So I think that's kind of our approach. Beers are involved. He's psyched,
So maybe I don't know much about long term because our team is just 2.5 years old, but we barely lose anybody during this time. And maybe just a small thing, and I always tell this to my guys, that you have to go back home and do something weird at 5 o'clock. So don't stay late. And even if your work is very motivating and very inspiring right now, if you stay late and do work, and it's managers usually love it, but you make a disservice to yourself because you kill your long-term inspiration and long-term motivation. So whenever I see somebody from my team working at 6:30, so we close usually at 5, I tell them to go home and do something weird, something inspirational, so the next time they can come back and be motivated. We also drink lots of beer, by the way, so that's
common theme. All right, well, thanks so much. If I get one more round of applause for our brilliant panel. I guess we can leave the stage now. And here's Jerry. Oh, thank you very much.
So thank you very much once again, especially for your kind words aimed at the young and aspirational designers among us. Now we will have a potentially short break, maybe 10 minutes, but definitely not more than that. So you can get some fresh air and have another round of drinks. And let's get back to your seat exactly in 10 minutes from now.
Akkor dél az lehetsen, vagy akkor mégis az?